Stietz. This is Two Nerds and a Joke with Robert and Ernie.
Thanks to Somebody Hot Girl Voice. This is Two Nerds and a Joke with Robert and Ernie. I'm Ernie.
Those are some dramatic and pregnant pauses there, sir.
Well, I tried
And
to do
I'm
Shatner.
Robert.
I tried to do Shatner on that one. I don't know if the pauses worked.
They might have. They might. We'll see how it goes out. This is, of course, Robert, as always, your friendly neighborhood Cobra Kai leader.
Oh, Cobra Kai. So you're Cobra Kai? You're not Miyagi Dojo?
That is the ultimate, isn't it? I mean,
Team Edward.
Yeah. Are you talking the original, or are you talking, of course, the new?
Oh.
You talk about that controversy, right? I mean, it is the ultimate 80s boyhood fantasy kind of real world hero type stuff. I mean, you kind of mentioned this, and we'll talk about where you mentioned this, but there was all this action and high end octane movies in the 80s during that time frame.
Yeah.
You always mention this is one of those movies that connected to kids, as this is an everyday hero.
Yeah. Yeah. No superpowers, no avenge me moment, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. It was just like, man, this could be any kid. This could be me. Like,
right.
The whole montage, like every 80s movie had like a montage sequence. And this one kind of like had one as well where he's training and everything. So that fell in line. The whole thing, the big twist was just like, the kids doing these chores, he's sanding floors, painting fences, waxing cars. And then finally, like, the teacher just stands in front of him and says, show me, wax on, wax off. And he throws a punch and he blocks it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see the look on his face, and like you're in the crowd as a kid and you're like, oh. Of course, I was doing chores that could never help me.
No.
In a fight.
Of course. Yeah, no. The rest of us were like, oh, we should do those chores now and, paint random fences. Big movement. But to celebrate that Cobra Kai, the new version, came to Netflix.
Now, is it a reboot? It's
not
a reboot. It's a continuation, right?
It is a continuation. It went through some growing pains. It actually was on YouTube Red at first, and then moved over to Netflix, which is where it is now, and is about to have, I believe, a third season. So what we did, you and I, is we reached out to one of our good friends of the podcast, which everybody might remember, the good doctor, Dr. jvonstietz, and we were like, and he...
double D or just regular D or what are we talking about?
He's got some D's in there, definitely some D's. But he reached out to us and we were like, you know what, we haven't had him on for a while, and he was all about we should do a Cobra Kai, and I was like, okay, sure. I watched the movie, I'm in, and so we decided, well, we need to get into this a little bit because Cobra Kai is kind of a big thing. Like, there's a lot to unpack in this movie, the show, the connection, the movies, and then the whole kit and caboodle. It's a lot of history, a lot of story, a lot of deep dives. So I, of course, not being obsessive about things ever, because that's not my style.
No.
Yeah, no, I'm very laid back when it comes to this stuff. I did my research. I watched. I did a Cliff Notes summary version with my brother-in-law, who is also obsessed with it, so I can get a couple different perspectives. So I can come in with some things to talk about. And you, of course, didn't have to worry because you were already there.
As soon as I watched it on YouTube, and then once season 2 was done, and then I heard the deal that Netflix was in negotiations to buy it, and they backed up the Wells Fargo truck, and now they have it.
Dump the money. So there's a lot there. Now, one of the things we do is we do give our users, and forewarned is forearmed, a little bit of homework with this, is at the end, you will be able to hear us talk about you watching the rest of the movies, because it is something that is going to come up and is trickled in, and nobody watched 2 and 3, or hasn't watched them in 20 years. So it may be time to revisit.
And number 4.
Number 4. The new Karate Kid, the other Karate Kid, whatever it is.
The next Karate Kid with Hilary Swank.
It was with Hilary Swank. So one of the things we definitely want you guys to know as a special treat, not only did we have this conversation with Jason, but the video was good enough at high enough quality, except for some delightful freeze moments with Ernie in some great expos.
No.
It's wonderful. It's
No.
hilarious. For those of you guys who are watching on YouTube as we speak, or who have not watched us before on YouTube, should definitely check us out on YouTube. We have not just the audio, but the audio and the video of Sponsorship Alert, Skype video conference call that we did the special. Now, one of the benefits of having Ernie in video is that he's almost always during our shows either eating or drinking.
This is factual.
Yes. In this particular show, he is drinking. So you will see some additional corporate sponsorship.
Nectar of the gods.
Yes, the nectar of the gods, as he calls it. So fun times, as always. So any other precursors you'd like to give our audience to warn them of your delight here, Ernie?
I have to say that of all the episodes, this is probably the one that is the most natural.
Okay.
I think this is more along the lines of, if you're used to like listening to podcasts that have a production team and a Spotify platform at your disposal, throw all that away. We go back to like the early days of podcasting.
Yes, definitely. But I will say this: we are on Spotify, so listen to us there.
Thank you. What was it from The Simpsons? We welcome our new overlords.
Indeed. So without further ado, and to all of our overlords that we bow to graciously, here we go, and enjoy the segment with our favorite doctor, Dr. Jason Von Stietz. Doctor. And take it away, guys, and we will talk to you guys in a little bit after the show.
And now, sports analysis of fictional characters with Dr. Jason Von Stietz.
All right, thanks for having me, you guys. It's always fun to meet up and to talk about great movies and how it relates to sports psychology or performance in general. And today I wanted to talk about Cobra Kai. For people who don't know yet, Cobra Kai is a sequel. It's like a follow-up years later to Karate Kid. It started on YouTube. It's now on Netflix. So if you have Netflix, you can watch it. If you know what YouTube is, you might be able to still see it there. I'm not sure. It might.
It was on YouTube Red, I believe, right? I mean, it was a kind of a subscription pay-for service at one, or got there at some point. So yeah, very very interesting story there with that too. So very cool.
Yeah, but it's a great show. I'm all in. I'm all in for Cobra Kai, and the basic idea is years later. It's been 30 years since the events of the first Karate Kid movie, and now we're following Johnny Lawrence. He was I guess you could say, the main antagonist. He was the ringleader of the Cobra Kai teenagers. He wasn't the sensei, but he was the top student, and he was the one who was sort of leading the campaign of today we would say bullying against Daniel LaRusso, Ralph Macchio in that movie, Ralph Macchio is the actor who played Daniel LaRusso. And now we're in the series Cobra Kai. We're following Johnny Lawrence today, and it's all about his journey, where he is now, how things have changed so much since the 80s for him. And Johnny is, in my opinion, Johnny is a great character. If you've seen Karate Kid, you get one version of him. You see him as sort of like the typical rich kid 80s preppy villain. He has blonde hair. He drives a convertible sports car, like some kind of 80s convertible sports car. and he's one of the cool kids, typical '80s preppy villain, and but you can just kind of tell from different things in the movies that he probably doesn't have like a good father figure. He is probably kind of tortured in some way. There's something going on there. They give little hints to it here and there. And then now in Cobra Kai, we see Johnny. He's no longer the rich kid. He's living a working class life, working maybe as a carpenter or as some kind of fix it man, and he's got a very very bare bones apartment, and you can see that he's lived a very hard life since the events of Karate Kid in the '80s, and you can see he probably has a history of drinking, and he's probably had some legal trouble, and his mother, you can see they tell you very early on that his mother passed away, and that he has a rich stepdad who kind of despises him, but has still bailed him out throughout the 30 years, and is helping him financially here and there, but definitely not helping him in any kind of emotional way or any kind of like fatherly supportive way. And that's where we come across Johnny Lawrence in the very beginning. So it's a very, very different story. And also very early on, we see Johnny driving still in an 80s car. So it looks like in a lot of ways, his life is just kind of frozen since the events of Karate Kid. And in a lot of ways, he's just kind of stuck in the 80s. A lot of the language that he uses is kind of like the language of an adolescent from the 80s. He'll talk about babes and doing things that are badass and stuff like that. And we see that when he's driving, he looks up and he sees a very cheesy billboard of Daniel LaRusso as a car salesman saying something like, "We kick the competition," and Daniel LaRusso is like kicking in the billboard, and we see Johnny just kind of sigh and like, oh man. So we see that Johnny is still really holding on to the feelings around being defeated, and probably the feelings around losing his girlfriend Allie or Elizabeth Shue at that time. And then so that's where we first meet Johnny Lawrence, and then he goes on to start his own Cobra Kai dojo, where he wants to give it a new spin. He doesn't want it to be the same kind of bad influence that it was on him. He wants to be a good sensei to his students, and he wants his life back in a lot of ways. He wants to be a successful martial artist, successful businessman, and he wants to get back to his martial arts roots, because that's when he did feel good, when he was focusing on karate. So let me just kind of, now that I've introduced the show and I've introduced Johnny Lawrence, let me just kind of leave it there for a little bit, and then see if you guys have your own thoughts about Johnny or about Karate Kid or anything like that, and then we can start talking more about the psychology.
Go, Ernie, before you hurt yourself. Go. We're gonna burst over there in 2 seconds.
As a proud representative of a child that grew up during the 80s, this whole film genre that came out, the original Karate Kid movie came out in '84, and I cannot express to you how much of an impact that was on kids my age. I was 10 years old at the time, but like watching it, that movie blew my mind, because at the time we had like movies like Rambo, we had the Terminator, movies like that were coming out, right? Big bulky action stars, and then there was this kid who you could kind of, every kid can kind of relate to, moving to a new place. He tries to fit in, runs across, of course, the typical clique, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have the clique of kids that have lived there. They're pretty affluent, and they seem to have everything at their fingertips. Like you said, with the nice clothes, the perfect hair, all that other stuff, the cool car, essentially they have their own niche, right? And then there's Danny, who tries to fit in, and of course, depending on your viewpoint, because since the movie's come out, there's been so many revisionist versions of that movie. You could either say that Danny kind of brought it on himself by like inserting himself into like Johnny's life at that point, or you can say that Johnny was just always a bully and, you know, this was just him. And like you said, as far as the show goes, I always wondered, that would be something I would want to like recapture, right? What are they doing now? Let's just say they're past high school now. How did their lives turn out? And then Cobra Kai kind of sets it up as Johnny peaked in high school, and he's still holding on to that, right? Like you said, he's still holding on to the 80s car. He's knocking around between jobs. Sounds like a contractor handyman type dude. So you go from a guy who was affluent, who basically could like have anybody do whatever he wanted, to like somebody who was at the beck and call of other people, which probably annoys him to no end, right? And then you have the kind of like, well, you know what? I still got a little bit of spark here. You know, I could defend myself. I know enough to get myself into trouble because of my mind being screwed up from all those years of, you know, the teachings of this guy who, I don't know, the Cobra Kai sensei, I forgot his name.
John Creasy or John Kreese or something like that.
Yeah, Kreese, but they always refer to him as Kreese. I don't know if he was like a Sergeant Kreese or Captain Kreese, because in the original movie you saw pictures of him like in Nam and stuff like that. So he was like this hardened battle vet, and he treated his kids like they were in the army, right? I mean, all those kids in the dojo, he would essentially order them to like run through a brick wall. In other words, with no care if they got hurt themselves. And it showed up in the match when he was like telling guys like, look, I don't care if you win your match or not. You're going to hurt that other kid to make sure he doesn't finish. And Danny, through it all, he kept persevering and he won the match. And the way Johnny says it, you kind of won it on an illegal kick to the face, but that's okay. I let that go. But we all know he really didn't let it go because, like you had mentioned before, he's driving around and now he's like in his own personal hell, right? Because now he's constantly reminded about that one moment. And I think everyone I don't know if everyone sports-wise, maybe you come across this more, where you have the athlete where they had that one moment that they'll look back on and like, if I would have just done this one thing different, you know, how different would my life be right now? Like it should be me on the billboard, right, selling the automobiles instead of this kid, right? And he can kind of see it, like he's a little soft now. He's kind of sold out. You know, he's, every time you buy a car, he gives you a bonsai tree. And that wasn't the teachings that Mr. Miyagi gave him. You know, he was more about balance and everything else, having balance in his life. And clearly, you know, when you have Johnny's story where, like, it seems like everything went bad after that. Danny's, and everything went, well, as I like to say, coming up Millhouse. You know, he got the girl. He had the cool car now. He had the great job, you know, he had a good teacher that loved him and supported him. And Johnny didn't have squat. Basically, he was on his own, right? He probably just graduated. He probably never went to college. And like you said, the stepdad that was married to his mom is just doing out of obligation. He doesn't care about what happens to Johnny. He's just like, I did this because I can do this. And this is what I've done my whole life. And he seems pretty miserable, even in his old age, right? But then you come across, I don't know, maybe there's a psychological thing where like you have the guy who didn't have nothing and gets everything, and then he kind of takes that for granted and has a little bit of that taken away from him. And then you have the guy who had everything that lost it all, and now he's clawing to get it back. So for a while, I'm rooting for Johnny, right, in this Cobra Kai thing. But maybe you might give some more insight. What, like the psychic behind it? Is it something common that you see this in athletes whenever they're like they hit the peak and then they just fall right down to the bottom, but they still linger around, they still hold on to that? I don't know if that's more like maybe an old boxer or maybe like an old I don't know, maybe you have that more in single person sports or team sports. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if we keep looking at movies for a little bit, or just use movies as a reference, that it's definitely something that happens where people, they put all of their hopes and their dreams into their sport, and they've probably been training at it for years, working hard, and it kind of consumes their entire identity, where that's who they are. They have trouble seeing themselves outside of their role in sports. And a movie example that would be Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite. He's constantly thinking
Nice.
of, yeah,
Nice pulls today, guys. Nice.
yeah. He's constantly thinking of, like, I think it was 82, man, back in 82, if coach would have put me in. So that one it's years later, in the 2000s at some time, and he's still thinking about 82. And then two, if coach put me in, so then he's being kind of naive, where he wasn't even the starter. He probably didn't have the skill that he remembers himself having, but he still thinks, like, oh, I could have done it, and if I would have, that would have changed the entire course of my life. So that's actually really common in real life too, and not just in movies. Oftentimes, athletes put their entire identity into their entire identity is wrapped up in being an athlete, and when that ends, because it almost always ends for almost everybody, either they age out of their sport, whether they're a professional athlete and they retire, or they're a high school athlete and high school's over, and they're not quite at the level of playing for a college. Or a really common thing that happens is people get injured. People get injured, and then they're just no longer able to continue, and then they just have to stop, and they lose their identity as an athlete. And it can feel like grieving the loss of a loved one. Like, it can be that same kind of emotional pain, where they can feel depressed for a very long period of time. They can just feel like their entire life is over. I can't remember who it was, but I remember hearing a story about a former USC football player who had left football, gone on, didn't think too much about it. Was sad, but just thought he was just moving on with his life. And then not too much long later, he was walking down the street, and then through a window of a store, he saw a TV playing college football, and then he just broke down crying, and then, like, all the emotions started flooding, and he just felt terrible. Like, he hadn't really grieved the loss of his identity as an athlete. He hadn't processed that, and then all of a sudden it just came flooding out without him even trying to do that. So yeah, people can definitely get stuck at that stage, and they need to grieve the loss. They need to. I think the NBA has a program that helps athletes to transition out of their sport and help them to think about their career after, and have savings accounts, and help them think about what kind of jobs they can do. Hopefully they can just retire and live off of the money they made. But those are the top guys, and a lot of the middle or the bottom guys, they need to have some kind of income coming in after they retire, and they can't just keep thinking about themselves as an NBA player and for the rest of their lives. So what we see with Johnny is that same type of thing, only he didn't make millions. He was an amateur karate competitor who was really big in that area, in the Valley. But now that's over. There wasn't college to compete in. There wasn't professional karate, or maybe there was, but that wasn't his path. And then now he's still just kind of stuck with those feelings, and hasn't moved on. And actually, so he could have processed that, moved on, and then maybe just been a really good carpenter or something. But he's doing something different, and I think that's also healthy, where he's teaching young kids. He's being physically active by getting back into karate. So he's still finding a new identity as a sensei, but and at the same time he's letting go of that old identity as, like, 80s badass. Like he's finally moving on from that in the show. So that's something really healthy that I encourage for Johnny.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. I really like that angle of it too. And I know you're about to say something, but I'm going to cut you off because I can. But one of the things I really found interesting in the dynamic between them, again, compared to old to new, is they've kind of again flipped roles. They kind of see each other's perspective a little bit more, hopefully. And the episode where they are in the restaurant, where they kind of they call it the TV. Oh, look who we ran into kind of thing. I don't know if you remember that episode where they're at dinner. They go to dinner and they kind of the wife and girlfriend and blah blah blah. And it's kind of it's that fine line where you cut between reality, what would happen, and what happens in TV world. And it is something that could be like, a wife or a girlfriend could say, look, this is ridiculous. You need to get over yourself. Let's go to dinner with these folks and really kind of, that's more realistic, but they kind of mush it in a slightly form. But the dynamic of that shift in that moment there of, yeah, we both made some mistakes, but we kind of see each other's perspective. Mm-hmm. Can be very, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it could be very cathartic to being able to move on. And it's kind of interesting because you need, not in real life, but in the movie TV world, you need conflict to kind of bring the drama to it. So I think that's when they kind of switched it over to now there's a new villain. Nobody knows he's the villain, but there's a new villain. And guess who it is? And it's kind of an interesting little shift there. But psychologically in that moment, is that something that you could see? You have competitors, and obviously boxing, like Ernie was mentioning, is a classic example. These guys have hated each other for decades. They are going to be one ring and blah, 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 blah. And it's all bull flop. There's no they're fine. They're friends outside of it. They don't care. It's all a show. But in reality, sometimes that actually does exist in real life where they really do. Dennis Rodman, I mean, what enemies didn't he have at one point or another? I know nobody liked Dennis. But there's those real life, these guys are enemies or just don't like each other or just whatever it is. Does that work in reality in the same way where two sports athletes, the top of their game, because both Danny and both of them were there at that moment, getting together where they were enemies in the ring, does getting together to have that kind of, can we get past our past and move forward work? Or is it really just kind of, it doesn't really get, it really is not going to help them because they're just still at the core different people in real world versus the movie world.
Right. I think it can. I think it can definitely happen where you have two people who might at the time really feel like they're hating each other and they're competitors. And a lot of times, at least in their mind, they're thinking, I'm going to kill that person or I'm going to die before I let them beat me. Like hopefully it wouldn't really come to that, but in their minds, that's what they're thinking. And I'm trying to think of some real life examples that I'm straining a little bit, but I think Muhammad Ali and I can't remember.
Yeah, it was who was it, Ernie? You're the pro boxing dude here. Come on, it was Muhammad Ali and who was the guy? There was someone else. It wasn't Mike Tyson, right? No, because there were two different generations.
No. You would have from that era of boxing, like you guys were talking about. You had because it's very similar to what this whole Karate Kid thing is. You have Danny versus Johnny, right? You have perhaps the best number one, and then this unknown number two comes up and he beats number one, takes the crown from him, and rubs it in his face pretty much. But does it in a way is kind of snide. You know what I mean? Now, if you go into real life, Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier,
there it is,
3 times.
Yeah, that's the one, right?
And Smoking Joe Frazier got the best of Ali in one of those, and these were knockdown, drag-out bouts. But I think outside of the ring, well, let me put it this way: leading up to the fights, it was clear that they just did not like each other. All right, at all. Mm-hmm. After the fight, however, they would be cordial to one another, but they always knew they had a little bit left in the tank to prove to one another. Like, hey, you may have gotten me last time, but I'm going to get you this next time, right? and they fought 3 times, and all 3 were epic fights. You could probably look at it. I guess if you were to switch it over to team sports, it's kind of like
Anybody in the Raiders because they cheat.
well, let's see. You would think
I'm just putting that out there.
In football, it would be like the Eagles and the Cowboys, like historic, like rivals.
Right.
Like the fans don't like each other, the teams don't
Right.
like each other. But you know what? When they all go out to like eat and stuff like that, like you mentioned in this episode, which I thought was very, very true nature. Like, what are they like when they're just like out and about, right? Like the 2 guys don't like each other, right?
Right.
And one of them actually blames the other one for everything that is bad that has happened in his life. And the other one's like, I don't know why he's so mad. I'm over it, right? So,
well, you won. That's why.
yeah, that's the whole thing, right? That's what he's not getting over. Another one would be like Red Sox Yankees, right? But like
yeah, that goes way back too.
Yeah, that goes way back also. But you can kind of see like when you meet like not outside of competition, everything else, it's kind of like almost like a friendly thing. Like we both have the same type of problems, right? We both having problems with our kids. We both have problems in our relationships. You know, women seem to like be like the thing that drives us crazy. Like no matter what we do, they always find a way to like, you know, be mad at us, right? And you're kind of hoping that these 2 guys could actually be friends, right? Which is the weirdest thing, because I'm thinking back on my childhood, and maybe it's just me. Maybe I don't know, Doc. Maybe you could tell me. School. I'm not friends with them now.
I'm sorry, you broke up. Can you say that again? At least on my end, I couldn't hear it.
Oh,
Yeah,
I was saying,
say it
like,
again.
I was like, you know, maybe it's just me, or maybe there's something about that. But like anyone who gave me crap as a kid, and if I ran into them now, I probably wouldn't be friends with them. Kind of like the whole like trying to bridge the gap between Johnny and Daniel, like what they're doing almost.
Yeah, totally. And you know, in a lot of ways, it's not really your job to make amends with just anybody who wrongs you. I mean, I guess that would be great, or if that's like your philosophy of life. But in real life, you know, you don't have to reach out to anybody that like scratched your car or was a jerk to you at some point, and then just become their best friend. As far as sports, another example, but probably to a lesser extent, is George St. Pierre and Dan Hardy. When back in the day, not that long ago, they had a big lead up to their fight. Dan Hardy, an MMA fighter from Britain, was really hot on the scene, and he was known for having a mohawk, kind of like Hawk, one of the kids in Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
And he was a punk rocker, and he would like dance before the fight and then knock a guy out and do all kinds of stuff. And then George St. Pierre was known for being very humble and respectful and all that stuff. And then they had a huge lead up to their fight. George St. Pierre won, like he pretty much always does. And then years later, I find out that now they're really good friends. So I don't know what happened. I don't know where that took place, but
where their dinner was.
Yeah, they had a dinner at a local Mexican restaurant, I guess. And
was there some sort of videotaping going on? Come on, I want to see that. You know, it's good for psychological analysis.
It happened on a Taco Tuesday, and everything.
Gotta love that. Everything's fine now. Yeah. But yeah, and that's a good point, Ernie, too, because it's like there's a couple people in my past who's like, could I forgive them? Could I really make up to them? And you're right. Is it a what was the nature of the wrong? Yeah, if you scratch my car or something, I'm not going to worry. But you know, if you were in this scenario, it's kind of the extreme, but it happens in real life where you literally were a bully to this person, and they kind of do that and talk about that, like, I mean, not to get way off topic, but it's relatable, sort of. Alcoholics Anonymous, or Substance Abuse Anonymous, those types of things, where you have to go through this process of going back to all the people and apologizing for what you've done. You know, kind of forces that process. But in sports and in these scenarios where there isn't a functional outside of yourself reason for those things to have happened, it's a lot harder. Like, look, I did these things because I was doing this. Because of those reasons, I need to go back to you and ask you to forgive me for my wrongs, right? Whatever it is. But in these scenarios, is so much more a matter of, as you were talking about, Ernie's philosophy on life is that something I feel I should do? You know, I'm on my deathbed. These people, what is the level, and what level of forgiveness do I give to them in my personal life? No reason beyond that I feel we should make up, be friends, and so forth. And that psychological, and that, I don't know the term, again, that's your area, Jason, doctor, but that kind of needing to be right with those who wronged you, even if you weren't in the wrong, kind of feeling is kind of what the 2 seasons kind of overarching for these 2 characters is kind of bringing forth, is how do you get forgiveness for what you've done when you may not even, I did nothing wrong, don't even know you did something, right? And then beyond that, go into, now what? What do we do from here? Do we become besties? Is that even needed? Is it necessary? What are we up against now? What's next? Right?
Well, I found interesting that for the first part of Cobra Kai, that first season, right? It was like Johnny basically saying, "Hey, look, I was the victim in high school. Like, I don't know what's going on here. I got, I had things going into my senior year. Then my girlfriend, like, stops talking to me. This kid that moved here from Jersey starts moving in on her. I'm just like trying to like talk to her again, trying to patch things up. And there's this guy moving in on my action. Next thing I know, we end up in a fight in the beach. I thought it was over. Next thing I know, he's messing with me at a Halloween party. Then the next thing I know, this old Asian guy comes and kicks my butt and my friend's butt. Then he shows up at my dojo. Like, I don't know what's going on. I'm getting stalked. Like, literally, like, the first part of, like, Cobra Kai is like, all right, we're seeing things from Johnny's perspective. I can kind of see him, like, taking that on, like, gosh, what did I ever do to deserve this, right? And I guess he held on to that, right? That I don't know if he considers himself the victim, but then Danny, the way Danny portrays is like, nah, I just moved here, minding my own business. I start talking to this girl, and this crazy dude just like whoops up on me, right? And I don't know how to defend myself. I had to start talking to this crazy Asian dude that lived below me and take me under his wing, and he taught me how to defend myself, and that's what I did. So like the two, I guess, depending on how you saw the Karate Kid play out, because there's some people I speak to now that totally think that Danny was the bully, and there's some people that think that Johnny was the bully. I always felt Johnny was the bully, but that's probably because I was a little jealous about all the stuff that he had going for him, and it was just nice to see someone like that get like knocked down a few pegs, if you know what I mean.
Ouch. Nice touch there, Ernie.
Yeah, Cobra Kai it's a really great show. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of like Game of Thrones, where you see one character's perspective, and then you agree with them, you like them, you root for them. And then you see another character's perspective, and then you go, oh, God, I agree with this person. I'm rooting for this person now. One of them has to win. But whenever you're seeing it from one person's point of view, it's really hard to root against them and to not see things their way. So when you hear Johnny talking about what happened with LaRusso back in the 80s, even though a lot of it is just kind of incorrect, it's still like, yeah, I can see it that way. Now that you've said it that way, I see it that way. And then some stuff Daniel did instigate. Like Johnny was just minding his own business, smoking a little bit of weed in the bathroom.
Nothing wrong with that.
Which I might add, the most non-violent thing a violent person could possibly do, right?
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. And then, yes, Johnny took it too far by essentially jumping Daniel with a gang. But Daniel did instigate that event. And then Daniel, he's very impulsive. And that was true in Karate Kid and in Cobra Kai, where if he sees something that he disagrees with or he thinks is wrong, he's very quick to just go running, just run at the problem, and then just start either punching and kicking or start saying things. And that's not always the best tactic. Things can be de-escalated at times. Things can, if you can just breathe and just keep cool, things don't need to lead to violence. So Johnny's not completely wrong, but but in a lot of ways he was instigating those, many of those fights. But hearing it from his side, it's hard to say like that. It's hard to say that he's lying. Like he's not lying. He did see things that way, and maybe a lot of it was coming from privilege. And when you're used to getting things your way, you're rich, you are popular, people bend over backwards to help you out. It's hard.
Ernie. That's your life, Ernie. You even got the blonde hair to prove it, those wavy locks.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, when people lose that advantage, it feels like they're being cheated, even though now things are just fair. So seeing it from Johnny's perspective, it's very believable that is how he sees it.
Now, bringing these two characters, so scenario, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you're in the room. These two characters sit down and you in the sofa, and this is before the dinner scene, right? Okay, so they haven't made up yet. I'm assuming that you'd have to try and get these two characters to that middle ground.
Right.
So it's like, I'm not here to make you guys besties. You're not going to want to give each other your kidneys, anything like that. But at least be that you can move past this to the rest of your life. So you're not living in the 80s and you're not being a douche. Those types of things, simple stuff.
Okay.
First off, would that be something that you would participate in? Have you ever done something like that? Like, I guess it would be almost like a psychological mediation.
Sure.
Is that something that would work? Would you do that? And if that was the case, how would you kind of start that even?
Sure. Well, for me, I like to do a lot of team building activities, which can sound kind of silly, and it is, but it is really good at helping people to bond and then helping people to work together better. So let's say that they were both on the same team, or they were both a part of the same dojo, and I was coming in to help them to work together better and just achieve more as a dojo.
Right.
I would have them maybe do something that might sound kind of surprising or silly, but I would probably have them do improv comedy together, or
nice.
have them do some kind of fun activity. And then when you're doing that, you're forced to work together in kind of a fun way, and there is pressure in the moment, not too much, but there is some pressure, and you feel uncomfortable, and you would probably resist things a little bit. But it is easier to do that, to do a fun improv comedy game, than to rehash.
Right, to take it head on. Tackling it head on doesn't always work. To kind of go over there, hey, look over there, that's some so cool, let's do that, and then you're really, you're gonna be best friends, you're gonna at least get along after this, I guess. Go for that angle of it. So that's kind of interesting. It's kind of funny. I took one course in college. It was called team performance and workshopping or something like that. It was literally that. It was the power of teams and how to do these team building things, and how some of them are useful and fun and whatever, but a lot of them are silly to create a false sense of pressure, so that we want to do this well, but we don't get along. So let's on our own get to a middle ground so we can get the task done. And in real life, those can just push through, or what's the word, carry over into the real world, even though all you have to do at that point is set it up so that it works for the people that it needs to work for. So you're kind of an overarching mediator of the process. And then if some other stuff comes up individually, sure, you'll sit down and do it like head on. But that sounds like a great way of doing that, which is in Cobra Kai, For this scenario, I guess it's dinner. That's what we get. That's all we get. We get dinner. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, as one thing that's really important, and it may be the most important thing about those team building activities, is to have those uncomfortable feelings, and then to be able to stay focused on the task and work together better anyway. So then in real life, you might feel angry, you might feel frustrated, but you can have those feelings and keep working together, and just do whatever you need to do. And then as far as the dinner, yeah, they were able to find common ground together in a really great, funny way by kind of criticizing the waitress, which I'm not usually in favor of, but they both kind of called out like, hey, well, why don't you just write it down? Maybe write down the order. See, I knew it. I told you, right? And they're able to bond together that way. And then
very respectful of our wait staff people.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they actually do kind of do a fun team building activity separately but near each other, where they just dance. They dance with their partner, and they're just kind of loose and having fun. And then yeah, that guy's right there, and normally I hate him, but I'm dancing right now. I don't care about that guy right now. So it did kind of work out that way.
So now my question to you is, when you see, we spoke a lot about Johnny. Now I just want to spend a little bit of time on Daniel. Sure. It seems like you could obviously say, like, if you disregard Karate Kid Part 2 and 3, and no one talks about the next Karate Kid, which unfortunately nobody wants to like talk about that with Hilary Swank. I'm not sure why.
Poor next Karate Kid.
Yeah. But like, she is the other student for Mr. Miyagi, right? Like, is she going to make an appearance at Cobra Kai? Different story.
That would be cool though, right?
But like for Danny, right? Like, I look at the way he turned out, and I'm like, I really don't like the way he turned out. I find him to be a little overbearing, a little bit like Johnny was back then. And it started off like from that first episode where, Johnny ends up at his dealership, and he has like this smugness about him. I don't know, maybe I'm misconstruing that, but you see the smugness of like years of him living in this lifestyle, having the nice. Now he lives in the hills instead of in the valley, right? He's got this compound of a house. He's got the 2.5 kids, so to speak.
Oh yeah. Living the life.
And
living the earning life.
Disposable income. Yeah, living my life. Swimming in the money, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But as far as like happiness, like, I think he's probably on the same level as Johnny, if not a little bit less. What are your thoughts on that?
It's possible. And then to just kind of reiterate what you were saying, when you're first introduced to Daniel LaRusso through Johnny's eyes, he's a little irritating. The roles are definitely reversed, where Daniel-san used to be the poor, down and out underdog, and Johnny was the rich kid who had everything and was picking on Daniel-san. And now it's completely reversed, where Johnny is a down and out working class guy struggling to pay his rent, drinking the most affordable Coors that he can get his hands on. And then LaRusso he owns a dealership that sells luxury automobiles. He has a huge house with all kinds of nice stuff, and he's intentionally tooling Johnny. Like, I was watching that part again, and then when Daniel is talking to Johnny in front of his employees at the car lot, Johnny wants to walk away, and then Daniel grabs him by the arm and pulls him back, and then he keeps like brushing stuff off his shoulder. Daniel's brushing things off of Daniel's brushing things off of Johnny's shoulder, and just kind of finding reasons to just kind of sort of be like an alpha male and kind of touch Johnny and put him down in really subtle ways in front of Daniel's employees. So yeah, it's really, the roles have really reversed, and Daniel is he's really behaving like a jerk. Now, that being said, I did a rewatch of Karate Kid Partially because I wanted to like Daniel again, and then partially
That's like, I liked him originally. There was a reason.
yeah, exactly. And then partially just to do a rewatch and you know and get really familiar with it again. And actually, Daniel's personality kind of stays the same, but his position changes. So before, when Daniel is, you know, a really skinny, you know, just almost like defenseless kid, and he's kind of like laughing and joking and almost pointing fingers and having a really big personality. It comes across as really endearing, and you know he's the underdog, so then you're not thinking, oh, this, you know, this jerk, you know, but he's kind of he's pretending to be a big shot in a lot of ways, like when he talks to Ellie and stuff like that. And then now Daniel still behaves that way, except he does have everything. So then, oh, it's not being charming and kind of flipping the roles. Like he's not being like a funny defenseless poor kid who's acting like he has it all. He has it all, and then he's acting like he has it all. So
it only works when you have nothing. Once you have stuff, stop it.
Yeah,
it's not cute anymore.
Exactly.
Which is interesting though, because that is very true. Let me ask you, because you talk about rewatching, right? And I know Ernie, you mentioned the other movies that do take part in this storyline. Do we? And I know it's been a while because I don't know when the last time you've any of you guys have watched these movies. I know obviously you've watched the original one, but do we feel the timeline is still okay? I mean, do we feel that 2 and 3, because there was 2, 3, and then the next, which really isn't related, I guess, but as you said, she could come back. But 2 and 3, do we feel that those are throwaways to the storyline, that they don't really matter to Cobra Kai in the same way? Or do we feel that parts of those come in through 2? I might have to go rewatch them, just check. Homework for our listening audience: watch 2 and 3, and then watch Cobra Kai, and let us know what you think. But what do you guys think? Do you think that there's still a timeline there that those movies aren't even useful? Or is it really, it's Karate Kid, Cobra Kai, you can skip the rest?
I'm assuming there's still a somewhat useful timeline. The trailer for the upcoming season 3, they give hints to part 2 where they go to Okinawa. So I'm assuming that's going to come in. And then I would guess, just depending on how long the show continues, they could bring in the other stuff. But I barely remember those movies.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to go back and do a rewatch.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was thinking.
Yeah.
Go on.
I want to say, for the casual observer, if you want to like immerse yourself in the Danny LaRusso, Johnny, what's his last name?
Lawrence.
Johnny Lawrence, yeah. Johnny Lawrence world. 1, 2, and 3, because in the first season of Cobra Kai, like Danny kind of mentions him like finding inner peace when he went to Okinawa. You know, bringing back the teachings of Mr. Miyagi about balance and what you know, how karate made it from like China to Okinawa, then like to the rest of the world. You know, its teachings, its fundamentals. Also, like, comes across the little toy that helped him like save his life. He said, "Oh, hey, don't, you know, it's a toy." Like at 3, he mentions to his wife that he became like with Johnny, that he kind of lashes out at his own family and like alienates them. And he says, "You don't understand. I was a Cobra Kai."
Right.
And that's what happened in part. He actually gets trained by Kreese's bet from the war, and he comes down and totally messes with Daniel's mind and gets him to be, you know, starts following the Cobra Kai doctrine, which is don't wait. Karate's not something. Karate, strike first, strike hard, you know, all that stuff.
Well, that's kind of interesting, right? Because that is, again, as you said, Dr. Jason Donson, it's been a long time since I've seen those 2, second and third movies, so it's kind of hard to place it. But it's kind of interesting because you're right. I do remember now that you mentioned, Ernie, that in the second or third movie they kind of take Danny down the dark path, and you kind of talk about the balance. And okay, if you learn this balance, then where the heck is that now? He's kind of reverted to back who he was. What happened? So if in that third movie, then they're kind of taking, okay, yes, he was this big dude and he had this big attitude and he had nothing, but because of his path to the good side and then kind of reverted back to the bad side, he ended up pretty much back where he was, because realistically, at the end of the day, yeah, these events were important to him in his life, but at the end of the day, you are who you are. And it really takes something small but significant, like him and Danny and what's his name, Lawrence, to kind of get together and kind of say, hey, oh, it's just really about us too. The rest of it's important, and it's kind of cool to mention it, but it's really about us and who we are, and it's about these kids, the next generation, which we will talk about in a separate instance. Those darn kids. But it comes back down to, because you take personal life, right? Mm-hmm. You go through, you have school, you get your job, your career, your this, your that, all these things happen. But then you go back and you look at, okay, who was I at 14, 15, 16? Who was I then? Who am I now? What really is different? Maybe I understand more. Maybe I can put more of an act of an adult. Sure, I'm an adult now. Yay! But realistically, at the core of who you are, yeah, you can act the appropriate way. But deep inside, are you really that different of a person from when you were? Yes, you can act, psychologically speaking, you can act appropriate. But in your head, we all know, still the same thoughts we had when we were 16, 17 years old. Let's not fool ourselves. We may say, oh, don't worry about that. Or, oh, yeah, don't think that way. But we still think it. You know what I'm saying? Is that still, would you say in your experience talking to people that that's still true a lot of times? Or do people actually really kind of go through a metamorphosis where they're really not anything to their core like they were at some point?
Ooh, well, it's hard to say. I would say, as far as I'm aware, in the research, personalities are fairly stable. So of course you grow over time. You might have less anxiety, less. Mm-hmm. You might be able to, be better at public speaking and all that stuff. If you really work on it consistently over time. But personalities themselves are fairly stable. So as far as somebody changing who they are at their core, I would have to imagine that it would be possible if there was some kind of maybe a really traumatic event, like maybe
right.
Maybe we take somebody, they go through a really traumatic event. And then now, maybe before they used to be trusting and friendly mm-hmm. and all that right. stuff. And then now they're very fearful. Mm-hmm. Now they're aggressive, right. So I think that could happen. Mm-hmm. And then maybe I've heard that, spending a lot of time in a completely different culture can do a lot to just kind of, also to increase your IQ because you're learning so much. And sure. To just maybe give you different perspectives and maybe shift your personality a little bit. I would have to imagine that could happen. But sure. Overall, personalities are pretty stable. And, right. and go back to Daniel for a second. I think in Daniel's mind, before coming across the new Cobra Kai gym or before coming across Johnny Lawrence, I think he probably thought that he was pretty happy. But I don't know how happy or how fulfilled he actually was. If we think about what's important to Danielson or to Mr. LaRusso now.
Yeah, there you
go. What he would think was important, he would probably say, oh, well, making sure I follow all of Mr. Miyagi's teachings, making sure I teach my children to follow those same principles, which we see the daughter, mostly did, and then she's going through some adolescent issues where she's hanging out with a bad crowd and that kind of thing. But then the son is just completely off somewhere else.
No one knows where he came from. He's like, what the?
Yeah.
Where are you from?
Yeah. So in some ways he's living the life he wants, but then not to the extent that he would want. And then he is just like, once he sees that Cobra Kai is back, he is just completely just out of control. Like he feels out of control. He's on shaky ground, and he is doing things that he doesn't even see a problem with until his wife points out, like manipulating another local businessman to raise the rent on a low income strip mall to put everything in that strip mall out of business because his high school bully started a business and he doesn't like that, so he's
Definitely becoming the bad guy there. I mean,
yeah.
come on, that's just douche at that point. Come on now. Yeah, and that's so weird to see, but yeah, I mean it is, and I guess for him it is a traumatic event. I always considered psychology to be the gentle manipulation of personality, so you're more respectable to yourself and to others. It's kind of how it is. It doesn't change you, but it allows you to have self-awareness so that you can see how you affect others, and you have to make that choice then of how do I be a better person. And Danny, at least at that point when does that strip mall bull floppery, insert swears here, you really say, dude, you need to sit down and look at yourself. Who's that man in the mirror over there? That's no. Look at yourself, because where's your teachings now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, principles what? I mean, come on, it's a bad, it's a dark path again.
Well, I found what I found interesting, and maybe you might relate to this also when you're watching the show. It's kind of like at moments you're like, man, you know what? If these guys only knew that they could be really cool with each other and they could be like each other's best friends, because they do have a lot in common. But like something will come up and it tears them apart. And I saw that a lot. I was like, oh man, they're actually getting along. Oh, he's helping him out. He's getting him a new car. Oh, he's helping him out with his business. Oh, this other guy's helping him out with his business. Johnny's helping him out with like stuff that's going on with him. Man, and then something comes up and you're like, it's the universe, man, that just like gets in the way sometimes. And you're like, I want to see how this all turns out now. Like they got me hooked. I can't wait to see season 3.
Oh yeah, very exciting. And when do we know when season 3 comes out? A date for that? It's just it's the times, man. It's the times. It will be out. God knows when, but it'll be out. It's kind of an exciting thing to see, because again, it pulls on that really hardcore heartstrings of the nostalgia of a generation, of Ernie specifically. But
it's set to release. So there's no official date. It's set to release in 2021.
Okay, yeah, which is pretty much everything at this particular moment, which is fine. We'll survive that and WandaVision. It's a whole other cluster. Anyways, but I definitely feel that this is definitely a show that has a lot of potential, and you got to look at the universe as the bad guy here in some respects, right? It's not either of them. They're just reacting to what happens. It's the world that's the problem, not them. But then you go back on it, and I'm sure Jason will agree, it's not the world, it's how you react to what the world gives you. Right. Correct, sir?
Right, exactly.
I think we'll give serious guest the final words on this. What say you there?
Give us your psychological next steps for these two going in to season 3, please.
Oh man, okay.
We're gonna put you on the spot. Here we go.
So thinking about what happened at the end of season 2, there was a huge school-wide brawl, which kind of unrealistic, but still had me captivated. I was still all in for it. We had Cobra Kai versus Miyagi-Do, just going at it in a high school. I think most people got some bumps and some bruises, but they were fine. But we ended up with Miguel, our who's essentially our new Karate Kid. And he's our top student for Cobra Kai. He ended up flying over I guess a ledge, or he got kicked off of a staircase down what looks like 2 or 3 stories, and fell very awkwardly and dangerously onto the ground, and could be paralyzed, could be comatose. We don't know where he is. We know that, well, Johnny was not in favor of this. So this wasn't Johnny's doing. This wasn't Daniel's doing. This was, it was essentially a proxy war for them, but they didn't want this to happen. And now both of them, mainly Johnny, but both of them are just kind of reeling emotionally, just trying to deal with what's going on, and they're confused, and they're probably blaming the other person. And Miguel, who is the injured person and who might be in a coma, I'm not sure.
He should be dead either way, but he's not.
Yeah. And John and Miguel was kicked off the side by Johnny's biological son, who they have a really strained relationship right now. And Miguel is sort of his adopted son, or his mentee, like his main student, like his Daniel son to Johnny's Mr. Miyagi. So Miguel's mom said, I don't remember what exactly, but I'm pretty sure she said something like, I never want to see you again. I never want you to be around Miguel ever again. How could you do this? And we end with with Johnny just kind of seems like he's leaving Cobra Kai and just everything he had established behind. Like he leaves his car, he throws his cell phone, and he just walks off. And wow. So what I would hope for Johnny, and really just everybody involved, is to speak to a therapist. Everybody needs all the therapy. Everybody needs all the therapy right now. Miguel needs just the best medical attention that money can buy. And then after that, he's probably going to need ongoing physical therapy. And then also the trauma of what happened, he's going to need lots and lots of therapy. So for Johnny, I would hope that his life doesn't just freeze right here like it did in the 80s. He was just making progress. He was just doing good things for the community. Some things didn't go so well, but he was overall doing good things for the community, helping lots of kids who were picked on and bullied. In the past, it would have been by a young Johnny, but now Johnny is helping these kids, and then they're helping Johnny too. They're helping him to heal a lot of his past traumas too. So hopefully he doesn't just walk away from everything. Hopefully he gets the help that he needs, and then, maybe even start Cobra Kai again, but then just with the understanding that, certain teachings are not helpful, other teachings are much more helpful. Or if he wanted to just leave karate behind, I would say, because of, what happened and because how traumatic that could be, as long as he could do something helpful and productive with his life, and do something mentally healthy, then I would be all for that. My guess is that he's going to get pulled back into the world of karate, and he's going to keep having a rivalry with Daniel LaRusso. But for his mental health, if he wanted to walk away, I would be okay with it, as long as he's getting the help that he needs and he's finding a way to live a good, meaningful life, and not just staying stuck and wishing that this had never happened.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? A+, sir. Very, very, very good. Very good summation. We do hope for the best for all characters based on what happened for season 2. Dr. Von Stietz, Jason, it's always a pleasure having you. We will have you back more on the regular. We appreciate your analysis and just pure fun. Let's just to say what it is, right? And of course, as always, as you say, Jason,
insert tagline here.
Insert tagline here, guys. We'll talk to you guys next time.
All right, thank you.
And that's another episode of Two Nerds and a Joke. Follow Robert and Ernie on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and subscribe to their YouTube channel.